And I would like to take a moment, with your permission, to speak about standing and standing up and about rising up in our tradition and in our conception of the world. I'd like to share with you for a moment that standing and standing up are essential to understanding the world around us. The prophet Jeremiah, in one of his early prophecies, calls upon us to stand on the roads of the world, to watch the paths of the world in order to evaluate which is the good. In order to see and evaluate the good, we need to stand. Moses tells the people of Israel in the book of Numbers, stand that we may hear that which God commands us. We need to stand, to stop, in order to hear the word of God. And, of course, the children of Israel at Mount Sinai stand at the bottom of the mountain, seeing the mountain smoke, seeing the sounds, it says in our Hebrew Bible, experiencing the awe. They stand at Mount Sinai in what is a standing covenant. Standing and upstanding means standing for good. It means standing for God. It means standing against injustice. It means standing in community with those others who stand. And yet, standing, the Hebrew amad, is sometimes not quite enough. We read in the book of Leviticus in chapter 19, you may not stand on the blood of your fellow human being. Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. We may not stand as the blood of the innocent is spilled. And so, sometimes we need to rise up. Rising up in the Hebrew, kum, relates to movement. It relates to change. It relates to changing hearts and minds in particular. God says to Abraham in the book of Genesis, rise and walk forth in the land and be a blessing. Kum vehit halech ba'aretz. The prophet Elijah, prophesying to Ahab and the kingdom of Israel when they sin, is called upon to rise and go to Sidon to save the life of an innocent child. And Jonah is called upon to rise and go forth to Nineveh, to prophesy unto the city of Nineveh, for its evil has reached the eyes and ears of the Almighty. Moses is told by God, rise and walk forth, leading the children of Israel onto the journey, onto the promised land in the book of Deuteronomy. We rise in order to move We rise in order to walk. We rise in order to bring about change. My friends, the blood of innocent men, women, and children has been spilt in this land. We may not stand. We must rise and go. We must rise and change. We must rise and speak out. And we rise because we believe that we can go. We rise because we believe that we can change hearts and minds in the way that the prophet Jonah changed the people of Nineveh when Jonah prophesied to them. We rise and we go because we believe that one day we may enter into that promised land, because we believe that that journey will lead us forward. We believe in the journey not only for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. We must rise together. We must make our voices heard, not only against injustice, but for our dreams of a better, more just, more equitable society, a society that is going to be more worthy of the lives of the children we saw speaking out on this video a moment ago. The children spoke of standing up, and we speak of rising up. May we rise together, and may our rising onto the journey lead us closer to justice. May we do so with justice in our hearts and our minds. May this be the will of God. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Reverend Moss, we're waiting for you.
Thanks to everyone. Special thanks to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Cohen. As we meet tonight and share words and prayers and thoughts and questions in our hearts, may we have a memorial moment in honor and memory of George Floyd and all the others who have died at the hands of lynchers, murderers, slave holders, innocent ones who came under the brutality of executions without guilt, imprisonment without just conviction, suffering without having committed anything that would invite such brutality, except for being human of a different color, a different faith, a different nationality, a different name and pronunciation. As we remember them, may we also recommit ourselves, in the words of the poet that I often quote, "Let me die working, still tackling plans unfinished, tasks undone. Swift to its end may my race be run. No laggard steps, no fumbling. Let me die working." Yes, and still in the words and thought and mind of another poet who said, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And those unforgettable words, often quoted by the late Robert Kennedy, "Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world." We gather this evening in that kind of spirit. And we are reminded of a moment in the life of Jesus when an individual came to him wanting an argument without commitment. He wanted, I think, a debate without duty. And he raised a question, and Jesus answered the question with a lifetime assignment, an assignment that was unexpected and no doubt unwanted. When he raised the question, you could say a profound question: what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said to him, do what is written. Love the Lord with all your heart and with all your strength and all your heart and all your soul. Love God with your mind, with your heart, with your strength, and with all of your inner being. Love God with all of your intellect. Love God with all of your energy, with all of your physical energy. Love God with all of your soul, with all of your breath. Love God, and love God with all of your heart, and your neighbor as yourself. Love God with, not with emptiness, not with platitudes, not with repetitive creeds, not with ceremony, although ceremonial performances can be beautiful and inspiring. But give God all. But that is not complete unless you can love your neighbor as yourself. And when you do that, you become what I like to call transformational idealists and creative realists. You can transform and you can create. So we are called upon in every age to be transformers, to be transformational in our commitments and creative in our life's work. That is not and should not be an easy assignment, but it's a necessary assignment. Love God with all of your being, with all of your emotions, with all of your imagination, with all of your creativity, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, this is an assignment, and the assignment can become, and I think should become, a commitment. And the commitment ought to be a continuing performance of purpose as long as there is breath in our bodies. Dr. Howard Thurman, who was and remains a great influence in my life and many others, said that hate arises in a circumstance where there is contact without fellowship. Contact without fellowship. And this contact without fellowship breeds suspicion. And the suspicion breeds fear. And the fear breeds resentment. And the fear and the resentment combined will breed hatred. And when that is planted in the body and mind and soul and spirit and heart of an individual, you have a human being walking around with all of this. And that means an individual or groups of individuals or even a nation or even a government walking around with hatred. And if the government has practiced for decades and centuries putting its knee on other people's necks, it becomes relatively easy for an individual to put his knee on someone else's neck until that person can no longer breathe, and being unable to breathe for 8 minutes and 47 seconds, we then have a dead body and a bloody nation. All of this is possible when we do not love our neighbor as we love ourselves, when we have not been taught or when we have refused to learn how to be transformational idealists and creative realists. The two need not be in conflict. This is our assignment. But not only that, this does not come automatically. It must be taught from day to day, from year to year, from boardroom to living room to classroom to classroom, and from assemblies to the wider spaces of life. When it is taught authentically, properly, and repetitively, we create disciples of truth and disciples of love. And those disciples of love and truth, united, can become an army of faith, hope, love, creativity, and yea, even a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This requirement leads then to a life of commitment and relationships and relationship building. One of my professors in college taught us by going in those days to the chalkboard. That's an ancient term now. and writing at the top, God. And just under that, human beings, humans, humanity, people, persons, all on the same line. God, persons. And at the bottom, things. Things. And then he said to us, whenever this order of being is out of order, dangerous and difficult things take place. If you put human beings at the top, you get a strange kind of humanism. And that kind of humanism is like a cut flower. It might be beautiful in the morning, but as the sun rises and the heat comes on, it withers at noonday, and it droops in the afternoon, and it dies at sunset. And he said, if you put things at the top, we become worshipers of things, materialism, systems, and class, and all of the other attendant evils. God, humanity, things. Where is our order? And why are we out of order in terms of the creative process? But when that order is structured properly, and we love God with all our heart, with all our strength, with all our mind, with all our soul, and with all of our intellect, with all of our emotions, and our neighbor as ourselves, as we love ourselves, the order of being is properly in order, and we can rise up and walk. And as one of the late outstanding African-American women of my denomination, Nanny Helen Burris, said, you're not properly climbing unless you are lifting as you climb. Someone has raised the question, what would have happened in Minneapolis if a certain individual had taken a knee like the football player? Not even a sparrow would have fallen to the ground. God, humanity, God, brothers and sisters, God, my neighbor, your neighbor, our neighbors, God, humanity, and things, and then we can rise up. We can rise up and walk. We can rise up and sing. We can rise up and create. We can rise up and build. We can rise up and create a new day. And the things we touch will be blessed. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Moss, for your words of inspiration and wisdom. While we receive questions from the audience, I am inviting you and Rabbi Cohen to expand and have a discussion, ask each other questions.
Reverend Moss, thank you so much for yet another lesson on love and humanity in the presence of the divine. You have seen so much of our journey, and our journey toward love and toward neighborliness is ongoing. We have needed this inspiration to continue moving forward at a time of darkness, at a time of frustration, at a time of division, and at a time wherein the feeling of love, love of God, and love of neighbor have been less felt than we would wish them to be. But the goodness of people is out there. The love is there in the hearts. And Reverend Moss, would you share with us what steps we may take to unlock that love, to unlock that love for God and for neighbor, that we may go together on a journey toward the society and government that you describe?
Thank you for the question. One, I think we have to, first of all, intentionally get to know our neighbor. I think we have to make that an assignment to know the neighbor. There's a poetic expression that I heard long time ago that has been planted deeply in my heart. If I knew you and you knew me, and each of us could clearly see by inner light divine the meaning of your life and mine, we would differ less and clasp our hands in friendliness if I knew you and you knew me. We have to intentionally get to know each other. And getting to know each other, we have to hear each other. And in order to hear each other, we have to listen to each other. But knowing and hearing will not be enough. We have to respect each other. And when we know each other and hear each other and respect each other, we learn from each other. And when we know each other and hear each other and respect each other and learn from each other, we become teachers one to the other. And out of that arrangement, which has to be intentional, we create community. And in that community, we produce and create and build. And that is a lifetime assignment. Building community. That's why the troubling question Dr. King raised in his last book, we must still grapple with individually and as a nation. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And some have chosen chaos. Some even lead by chaos. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Reverend Moss. I know that we have a few questions that are going to be coming up soon, but I wanted to add a reminder to us in the meantime of the speech of Rabbi Joachim Prince right before that of the Reverend Martin Luther King in the March on Washington, wherein he reminded us that the word neighbor was not a geographical term, but rather a moral term, and that we will not love each other and be able to appreciate each other, get to know each other, as long as we do not recognize each other as neighbor in the moral sense of the term. A person who lives with us and is destined to thrive with us.
It is a blessing that you raise that memory. Thank you. I was blessed to be standing not far from the stage when the rabbi was speaking, followed by Dr. King. There was something else the rabbi said in his remarks, which has been etched in my memory now for more than a half century. He said, and this is a paraphrase, that there was something that happened in Hitler's Germany that was worse than the gas chambers. And that was the silence of so-called good people. The silence. And since that moment, that day, and that experience, I, along with others, have been talking about the sin of silence, when a word must be spoken and action must be taken. The sin of silence, and the silence of so-called good people who watch the lynchings, the choking, and all of the brutality taking place, and they never say a word.
Reverend Moss, Rabbi Cohen, there's a number of questions from the audience, and I'd like to present a few of them with our limited time left in the program. A repeated question by many is, how do you talk to people who disagree that racism is a problem in our society, people who fail to recognize the problem?
Rabbi?
David, I am so grateful for the question. Thank you for this. I'm afraid that in the short time that we have, I can only offer but a brief summary of the tip of what would be an appropriate response. I would suggest that the appropriate response here at the very start, at the very beginning, would be to speak with these individuals, to not shy away from conversation and exchange with them, to speak with them with love, with understanding, to bring them increasingly along. I want to suggest that it will do us no good to sit on the sidelines and to look out for our friends, for those with whom we are in agreement, and to speak with them and with them only. We must reach out and open the eyes of those who would not see. Allow those who are afraid to walk with us to take a step. Allow those who are afraid to hear to open their minds and to listen. To do so with love, to do so with compassion, and to do so with ongoing purpose. We must be able to speak to others, to hear their experiences, and to share with them our own. Reverend Moss.
I agree. And I would only add that we must also examine where we are, the conditions under which we are living and moving and acting and building. And there are at least two things we ought to constantly examine. One, no one has a right to be comfortable with injustice. No one has a right to be comfortable in his or her oppression of someone else. So if an individual, whether that's just a single person or a powerful leader, no one has a right to be comfortable while you or someone else, while you are being mistreated or someone else is being mistreated. Secondly, no one has a right to profit from my mistreatment. So we must go deep and examine the structures around us and the structures in which we live and ask ourselves, who is comfortable with this injustice? And I think they must be made uncomfortable. And who is profiting from this injustice? And then it becomes our moral responsibility to make them uncomfortable and non-profitable. It was James Russell Lowell who said, it's prosperous to be just, but a large segment of our society has grown satisfied with profiting and being comfortable in that profit, and we can shift that. And we see some of that taking place right now before our very eyes.
Thank you. Another question. This is for Reverend Moss. What do you believe is the catalyst responsible for global support for Black Lives Matter, as opposed to other videos and images that have been taped of brutality and murder at the hands of police previously? Why is this moment different?
Repeat that question again. I think I missed part of the first part.
What do you believe is the catalyst right now responsible for the global support for Black Lives Matter, as opposed to other past videos of police brutality and murder?
You know, years ago, I heard Dr. King speaking about the Montgomery movement. And why was it that the Rosa Parks experience created a movement? Other persons had encountered the same experience that she had encountered, and one or more had been arrested. And then Dr. King said, the cup of endurance had run over. There comes a time when the cup runs over. The cup of endurance runs over, and people rise up because they determine that they will not take it any longer. Out of which experience grew that long-standing African-American spiritual freedom. Oh, freedom, freedom over me. Before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. I have the right to die fighting for that which is right. The cup runs over, and we are at one of those moments in history when the cup is running over.
Thank you, Dr. Moss. One more question, and we have to conclude our program. This was repeated by several people. They want to know, well, is voting a form of rising up?
I would say yes, emphatically. And I say that, and all look around us and see how far and how vicious some people and systems and organizations are to keep us, some of us, from voting. The lynch rope, the bombs, the murders, the assassinations, laws passed, gerrymandering, all of this, reducing the days and making it as difficult as possible, which means that there is always the potential of a nonviolent revolution in the ballot. And those who are opposed to justice and freedom and democracy will go to any lengths to keep the ballot from the hands of many, especially those who are oppressed.
Thank you, Dr. Moss. I'd like to call on you and Rabbi Cohen to give your closing remarks. Before doing so, I want to reiterate that tonight's program is the beginning of the conversation, this conversation. We'll be sending out a survey to everyone for your input and feedback on what comes next. Reverend Moss, you want to begin parting remarks?
I believe that this is a critical hour to make our nation better, stronger, and more just. And I further believe that we have in our hands and in our embrace and in our lives at this moment to make a difference. I have often said that in our time and in our space, by God's grace, we can, we should, and we must make a difference. That power is in the hands of each one of us. And when our hands are united, there is no limit to what we can achieve in our own time and pass on to the next generation. And those of my generation, I think, have the responsibility of encouraging and lifting and blessing those who are now on the scene with new strength, new determination, and a knowledge and wisdom and a mastery of technology that can make a difference now, but it's a lifetime assignment.
Thank you. Rabbi Cohen?
Reverend Moss, our teacher, we will stand with you and with all others, and we will do more than just stand. We will rise with you and act for change. We will lend our voices and our actions for change. We believe in this journey. We have seen you this evening. We have heard you. We have learned from you. We are getting to know you yet again. You are our neighbor. And we together will rise and go and bring about change so that those who follow us may continue to hear, to see, to, when necessary, stand, and then rise and go themselves on that journey toward the promised land. We shall do so together with love.
Thank you.
Amen. For me to say thank you to Reverend Moss and Rabbi Cohen for sharing yourselves with us and inspiring us doesn't adequately express our collective gratitude, but I'll simply say thank you very much. I also want to thank our community partners and for everyone who joined us this evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
And God bless you.
Thank you.